So in the industry, we call this a dial indicator. But why would I need to use it on the surface of a rotor? It usually picks up measurement for like play in a front end, like a suspension, ball joint. But we have a problem with this car, and I want to get into it with you. So the complaint on this vehicle is a pulsation. You got a dial indicator, checking the rotor surface, because we're checking for a brake pulsation. Now, in the old days, we used to put them on a brake lathe, and we would check the run out. But nowadays, you can check it real quick this way because it could be other issues. It's not always the rotor's fault. Maybe we have a hub issue. Was there a little bent in the road, like a bump or a curb hitting? There's all sorts of problems that can cause this. Let's get into it. We're going to take all the wheels off and use that dial indicator and see what the problem is. So I'm at the driver's front wheel here, and I have my dial indicator all set up. And I'm going to use 4 different colored dry erase markers because I want to mark on the glass which wheel has the worst run out. So I'm going to take the red one first. I put a little dab right here on my caliper, just in case I get one of those moments where I forget what I did or what wheel it was, correct? So let's go ahead. I have someone turning the wheel. They're going to turn at a steady pace, and I'm going to mark the highest point on my dial indicator. Go ahead. Cool, thank you. All right, so now I'm going to move to my next wheel, and I'm going to use another color. All right, so now we're at the right front wheel. Got my trusty marker. I'm going to mark that green, and we're going to mark it green. Go ahead and spin the wheel for me. What a difference. Look at that. That's awesome. So it's not even moving. I'm just going to dab it right at the 0 mark so I know the green never moved. All right, onward to the next wheel. So here we are at the right rear wheel, and because the car is not running and the transfer case won't be active, I have to turn this steady by hand, but I'll do my best. I'm going to use a blue dry erase and mark my caliper, and we'll try to set up, this is where it's going to be difficult because I have to try to mark and turn it at the same time. Let's see how good I can be. Go ahead and test me. Here we go. I'm going to turn it at a steady pace. Well, the good news is I'm not going to have to mark anything. This rotor is good also. So I'm just going to take my blue mark and put it right next to that green. Awesome. Now let's move to the last wheel and we can move on. So we're at our last wheel, the left rear wheel, and we're going to use black. So dial indicator set up. I'm going to mark our caliper with our little black marker. And now I'm going to turn it. Let's hope I can do it again with one hand, and we'll see what this run out is. This looks really good. So far nothing, so we're going to just put that black dot right in the center to indicate it has not moved. And maybe I'll put a little mustache on you. So now we've made it back to the driver's front wheel, so left front wheel. And that is the only place that this dial picked up a huge movement on that rotor. So we know the rest are okay. We know there's no caliper hanging out, and there's no problem with the rotors or the hub. So now we have to determine whether it's going to be a hub issue or a caliper issue. Now, I've road tested it, and I didn't get a drift or a pull. So I'm going to say the caliper is going to be okay, but I'm not going to overlook it. So when I take it apart, I'm going to check my sliders. I want to make sure they're not hanging up. Not enough to cause a pull, but maybe enough to cause a vibration or damage to this rotor over time. Meaning it held the caliper on when it shouldn't be, and it caused a high spot. More than likely, it's going to come down to this manufactured rotor. Like it has a high spot. It came from the material when it was made, and that will be a great ending because we don't want a hub damage. And if a driver error, meaning that they slammed the brakes on quite a bit when they got hot, that will cause high spots. But the rest of the rotors look good, so I'm going to say the driver is pretty good. All right, so now that we took the caliper off, let's check our slider pins. They seem to move really good. I'm not going to say that that's hanging up and causing a problem, but you want that to be able to move. If it's not, that is an issue. And check your pads. Make sure they're not frozen in the bracket. Like, are they moving freely? And they sure are. Matter of fact, the spring here could pop them right out at any second, as it just did. And see, that's good. That means that they're all doing their job. So it's not going to be that problem. We're going to remove this rotor. Now the hub looks really good, but a bent hub, you're not going to be able to see with the naked eye. So I could do two things here. I could remount my dial indicator and check the hub, but it's got the surface rust on it, just a little bit, and I know I'm going to get some movement. But the next best thing would be put a brand new rotor on from 1A Auto, bolt it down, and then check the run out. And then that will tell me if the hub is, if I need to go deeper into the hub. So let's do the simple thing first. Let's get a new rotor and put it right on. So I'm going to take a wire brush and just take this rust off, just the surface rust. Because like I said, this car doesn't have a lot of miles. If you had a lot of rust on here, like an average hub, after so many miles, take a little nice sanding pad to it and get rid of it. But you can still see the ID number on this hub. So I'm just going to scuff it, make sure I get a good amount of that rust off. And then I'll get the new rotor, like I said, and we'll mount that. Let that dry quickly. So now I'm going to mount my new rotor, line up that mounting screw. Now with an impact screw, you have to just give it a tap back on so it just gives that snug. I'm going to mount my bracket back on so I have a good same place to mount my dial indicator. So I'm just going to mount the bracket just so I can get a good, I want to be in the same place that I mounted that other for the dial indicator, shall I say. Now this is also a good way to check your brakes out, check hubs out, check suspension, whatever it may be that you might think you need is a pre-check, because then you can order all the parts at once from 1AAuto.com. And that's why the pros like to put the kits together for you, so you're not piecemealing it, you know, and going back and forth. It's nice, convenient, and we've thought about what you're going to need to do the job correctly. Nothing worse than having to wait for another item or go get one, huh? All right, so I'm just going to hand tighten this because I just want a good snug spot for my dial indicator to mount. Let's do that. All right, so now I've got the new rotor mounted. I'm going to take my little Sharpie here. It's not a Sharpie actually, it's a dry erase, but I'm taking my marker and I'm going to mark, you know, like just a marking so I know that I got to do a full rotation and go from there. All right, dial indicator set at 0. Let's see how much movement we get. Minimal, just like the rest of the wheels. Very minimal. That's perfect. All right, so now that we installed the new rotor, we didn't have to go to the hub because the new rotor took care of it. The dial indicator had maybe, if you looked at it, like 1 or 2 thousandths of play, which is perfectly normal. So I want to look at the old rotor and see if I can find the story of why this happened. And don't see anything too obvious, but if I look closely, you might not see with the camera, I do see some spots where it looks like it's different colored, so like a dark blue. That tells me that this probably got really hot at one point, and say you ride your brakes or you don't apply the brakes, you know, like a nice feathering when you're getting off a highway. Some drivers like to go whatever the speed they want to go, but when they come up to the exit ramp, they don't like decline slowly in speed. They just wait till they get to that ramp and they apply that brake pedal. And what happens is these rotors get real hot, 350 degrees easily. And when you squeeze the hydraulics of those brake pads, if it's a slow motion and it's a constant, like slowing the vehicle down, it cools it evenly. But when you come to the exit ramp and you squeeze it really hard and it just slows the vehicle down instantly, you're caused a hot spot, like you just cooled it down so quickly in that one spot, then released it and went here. But you're going to cause steel to have a hard spot on it because steel doesn't like to get cooled down that quickly. It will cause a problem. So when you drive like that, this could be the end result. And you have to do brake service way before it's actually needed, because if you look at the pads here, plenty of meat on these pads. Now, some people would say, well, why don't you turn the rotor? And turn means you machine it. Nowadays, manufacturer makes cars and the rotors so right to the spec of where they're supposed to be for gas mileage. Because if we made these thicker, the gas mileage on each rotor, the vehicle would weigh more, and your EPA, your gas miles per gallon, would be way off the chart. So they cut back on this, and that's why the price of rotors is so inexpensive now compared to what they used to be. And I could turn it, but more than likely, it's going to come back with a pulsation. That's always been my experience. So I'm going to put new rotors on this and new pads from 1A Auto. We're going to go down the road and hopefully see no more problems. All right, so we were lucky enough that the rotor was the problem, but say the hub was, and you would say, how the heck can a hub be bent, you know, with a low mileage? Well, mileage really has nothing to do with it. It has to do with driver error or situations that might have happened. So first thing I would do if this came into my shop and that hub was bent, I would check out all the rims because they could have been rotated. So I'm gonna be looking for chunks taken out, like a good scratch, deep scratch, where maybe they slid a little bit, whether it was water or ice, and they slid and hit a curb or hit any item. Or maybe they had someone back into them right at the wheel, backed in, bang, and they're like, oh, all looks good, see you later, bye. So that hub that's bolted here, that took the main hit. If you hit out here, physics, the outside diameter, it's gonna hit the center piece. That has a bearing in it. So it has to have movement, but not physical to our hands, but it moves as the wheel goes. So that's gonna be the weak point because it's two pieces that come together. If you jam that hard enough, obviously not with my hand, but the weight of that vehicle, it can tweak that inside of that bearing, and so the hub's gonna get the end result of it, and it's gonna go like this. But luckily enough, I was lucky enough, it was the rotor and not the hub. Cue up fans, turn on green screen, act like I'm going down the highway. No, I'm just joking. I did go down the highway and it is all good. So I'm pretty excited that we didn't have to do a hub, but if you do, now you know how to diagnose it and you can get your parts from 1AAuto.com.